When the Japanese government wrote this year's budget, it had to guess what its own borrowing costs would be, and it guessed 2.6%. Why did it guess? Why doesn't it just know this number? Well, remember how I said earlier that the government doesn't get to decide what its borrowing costs are. The government sells bonds to borrow money, and the lenders, the people who buy the bonds, who lend the money, decide the cost of borrowing. Well, it turns out that the lenders weren't happy with just 2.6% interest. They wanted more due to Takahashi's new spending. I say her name different every time, I'm very sorry. So before the budget was even finished, Japan had to change their borrowing cost estimates to 3%. And that 3% is now the number that their entire budget for 2026 is based on. But then last Monday, Japan's 10-year bonds hit 2.95%. Highest since 1996. It's settled back to around 2.87% since, so they are just this close away from their own accounts being wrong for this year. Analysts at Deutsche Bank called 3% a critical defense line for fiscal credibility in Japan. So Japan's finance ministry is working on next year's budget right now, and their expectation for next year is 3.8%. Now remember what I said earlier about Japan. They racked up debt when interest rates were near 0%. Any guess how much debt they got in bonds at this point? About 7 trillion. Not yen, $7 trillion. Most of that is borrowed at an average of 0.98% interest. They can't pay it back right now, so they have to refinance that over the next decade. And they are now budgeting at 3.8% interest. So what happens when you suddenly have to pay 4 times the interest on $7 trillion? I mean, nothing good, really. To be fair, it doesn't land in one hit. It's not like all of a sudden they have to pay that much interest on $7 trillion. They refinance a slice of that each year. But you can see the problem. There's a table on the data sheet that's included with this video. It should be on the screen now. Just on the debt they already owe, if interest rates stay this high, their repayments are going to double in the next 5 years, which is not good. It's not good. Imagine your repayments double. You have a loan for $10,000, you're paying $1,000, now all of a sudden you have to pay $2,000? That's not good. At the same time, the yen is completely falling apart. That's their currency. It went past 162 to the dollar, so $1 gets you 162 yen in June, which it hadn't done since December of 1986. And then it hit 164 in July, a 40-year low. And the problem with that is that Japan imports most of its energy and its food. A weak yen means that every barrel of oil costs more, which pushes inflation up, which pushes the yield on borrowing up again. They've been wanting inflation up for 30 years because they've been suffering through deflation. Now they got the inflation at the worst possible time. So Tokyo tried to fix it themselves. Defending the yen means that you spend dollars to buy yen. And they spent tens of billions of dollars doing exactly that. That was in April and May, and it bought them a few weeks. Then they started running out of dollars. And there's only one place that Japan keeps its dollars: American government debt. They are the biggest holder of US government debt on the planet. So they need to dump it. They need to sell it so they can get the dollars to save the yen, which is America's worst nightmare. America's own borrowing costs are already climbing on their own bonds, and Japan dumping US debt would send their borrowing costs even higher. So in July, Washington stepped in and bought the yen themselves. And that's China's plan finally reaching the US, finally reaching you in the West. It reaches all of us in the West, the US, Europe, it affects us all. And none of this is really working for Japan anyway. They spent $87 billion in 2 days trying to defend the yen, and all it did is had a brief recovery and then it dumped again. Now, does this mean that Japan's going to collapse? That's what everyone's saying. No. People have been calling for that for years, for my entire career, for like 25 years, longer, honestly. That's not what this is about. Japan doesn't collapse. It just stops sending you its money. Because for 30 years, Japan has been the lender of the world. It's a rich country, but investing inside of that country gets you 0% return. So all of their money went to the US and to other countries. But now, all of a sudden, you get a few percent interest in Japan. I'll give you an example. At the end of 2023, America paid 3.88% interest. Japan paid 0.95%. So of course the money left towards America. Today, America pays 4.7% and Japan pays 2.8%. So the gap is closing. It's not quite there yet, but it's closing. And when that happens, your pension takes the first hit. If Japan starts selling its US debt, the price of debt falls and yields rise. Problem is, your pension fund bought those bonds when yields were low. So your bonds all of a sudden lose a lot of value because there are better bonds out there. By the way, I put together a free retirement guide, how to retire before 2036, 6 steps, everything I do if I was starting again at 40 with nothing. No hype, no nonsense. It's free to grab. There's a link below. Check it out.